So I'm going to go up here and borrow Paul's guitar. And I hope it reaches. I think it will reach. Yeah. And I'll try to step down here without breaking his guitar or my leg. All right. I've done this song before in here. This seemed like a really appropriate, thank you, Paul. It seemed like a really appropriate song for, whoa, this is so dropped down. All right. And here's the guitar pick. I don't want to lose that. It's a wonderful song by Guy Clark, and it seemed particularly appropriate this morning. Well, he's 8 years old with the flour sack cape tied all around his neck, standing up on top of the garage, and he's figuring, what the heck? Screwed his courage up so tight, well, the whole thing came on around. He got a running start, and bless his heart, it headed for the ground. 'Cause he's one of those who knows that life is just a leap of faith. You hold your breath and you spread your arms, and you always trust your cape. Well, now he's all grown up with the flour sack cape tied all around his dreams, full of all sorts of anxiety, and he's busting at the seams. Stuck his finger up in the air, said it's gonna be do or die. He wasn't afraid of nothing, and he was pretty sure he could fly. 'Cause he's one of those who knows that life is just a leap of faith. Spread your arms and hold your breath, and you always trust that cape. Well, now he's old and gray with that flour sack cape tied all around his head, still jumping off of garages and probably will be till he's dead. And all the folks around him saying he's just acting like a kid. Well, he was pretty sure he could fly, and guess what? He did. 'Cause he's one of those who knows that life is just a leap of faith. You hold your breath and you spread your arms, and you always trust your cape. He's one of those who knows that life is just a leap of faith. Spread your arms, hold your breath, and don't forget the cape. Thank you, Paul, for that. And wonderful song that I used to sing at these camps that Brad is now doing, that I used to do, these pediatric oncology camps. And of course, the one story that I've told before and that I wrote about, I'm just going to share it for just a minute in case you didn't read the blog or in case you don't remember, because he's always been an inspiration to me in this idea of change and how we face change and how we adapt with change and how stories that have become sort of fixed stories for who we are, where we are in our faith, where we are in our faith community, where we are in this space, how those stories become fixed, and we cherish them the same way we cherish things that we put on our shelves at home, in the same way that we cherish favorite foods and favorite restaurants. We cherish these things, and yet something about them also becomes a little stagnant. Something about them also holds us back in some ways. Resurrection is a momentary invitation. It's always happening. Always opportunities for redemption. And I think of Zach, who was a 12-year-old kid at one of these camps out at Camp Rainbow out in Arizona. And Zach had 2 or 3 different kinds of cancer, but he was almost going to miss this particular year of camp. And of course, camp was the one place where a lot of these kids felt like they could be who they really are. Some missing limbs, some with disfigured faces, some with limitations in physical abilities, all of them feeling perfectly at home, perfectly in heaven in this environment at camp. And so many memories created. They know they miss out if they can't be there. And Zach was intending on being there, but Zach developed had another development of his cancer, and he ended up having to have his right leg amputated. And that happened several months prior to his being at the camp. But he was determined, and they had purchased him and set for him a new prosthetic leg. And so I was looking for Zach on the first day of camp, and I found him around back one of the fields with the other kids playing baseball. And he was standing on his one left leg and had his right leg in his hands. And as the ball was coming, he took one big swing, and I looked and I hollered out, "Zach!" And he said, "Don't worry, Tom, it's titanium." And he hit the ball, and he hopped to first base, and everyone just applauded. It was an amazing moment. And that whole week, Zach was not just one of the stories. They were all heroic, transformative stories, adaptive stories, stories made new by whatever moments brought to them and whatever history they brought. They were taking away something completely new with them when they left after that week. And at the end of the week, his cabin got to do the zip line. And I remember being with Zach on the zip line, because we all got to pick counselors. They got to pick counselors to help them, guide them along the way. You know, they're 20, 30 feet up, walking along the ropes course, and they're tethered to a cable, but still you're encouraging them and moving along. And there's Zach moving along with just his one leg. He wasn't using the other one as much, although he had it attached, but balancing was more challenging with him. But then he got finally to the little pod, the little post, the stand at the top of the zip line post. And it's just big enough for 3 or 4 people to crowd on there. And so the counselor goes up there. They have the one technician who's up there, and they have Zach. And we're up there together waiting, and Zach's about to go down. It's about 150, 200 yards out across the field. And standing where we are, we're probably 50 feet above the ground below us, kind of hanging over a little bit on the ledge. And Zach's looking at this, what looks to be a guy younger than him. He's probably 17 or 18, but he looks pretty young. And Zach looks back at me and says, "Tom, do you think these guys really know what they're doing up here?" And I looked at him as he was looking. I looked at the technician there who was tethering Zach while he was on his phone with his left hand and kind of texting something to one of the other counselors real quick. And I looked at Zach and I said, "Yeah, they got this down. They do hours of training." And Zach says, "Yeah, I'm not worried about it." He unhitched his leg, handed it to me, and said, "You're next. Don't forget to bring my leg with you." And he zipped down the line screaming something. And before he left, I noticed he'd written something on the post. And I've shared this with you in the past. And there's lots of things people write up there. You know, be present to the present that's given to you today, that kind of thing. And then, of course, what Zach wrote, which was, "Don't forget your cape." And that became sort of a slogan for a lot of kids as they made their way through this camp. But it's a little bit of what's in our text this morning, I think, what Jesus is saying. You know, because here's this interesting story, and stories are interesting, aren't they, in terms of how you find chapters and how you... I told Sharm and Brad as we were talking earlier this week, you know, beginnings, endings, how do you mark an ending and mark a new beginning? And there's different ways you can do it. Some of the most interesting ways are where you just sort of finish and you just kind of walk out and you're just left hanging, right? You're left hanging. What's going to happen next? And hopefully you were interested enough that you come and see. I've always been afraid that if I ever did that, people would just go, that was interesting. Kind of like the Truman Show. When it finally ended, they all said, "What do you think's on the other channels?" And they just changed the channel, you know. And then we thought about, well, we'll hand out rocks, and we'll have you write something on the rock, you know. And then I said, nah, I'm not about to give people rocks while I'm up there speaking. I don't want to do that. And so they're sitting back in the corners, and they're being guarded safely back there by Justin. So we thought about how do you make transitions? What marks a good transition? And here's this great story of Jesus he's been in one town. He was in Gerasene, and he was, you know, doing healing and all sorts of things there and miracles. And then he comes to his hometown. And there's this complete contradiction, this complete antithetical kind of moment, because there in his own hometown, it's like he's got nothing on these people. They know exactly who he is. They know his history, right? They have the memories. We remember this boy growing up. We know what he did. We saw what he was doing to that other kid down the street, you know. I mean, we know what he was about. This is Mary and Joseph's boy, and we know his sisters and his brother, and he couldn't do anything, right? Because they had his number, but it wasn't really his number, right? I mean, we have our numbers in here. We have our narratives in here. We have our stories in here, but they're not really our stories. And yet we still carry them. We still carry them. We still carry memories of where people might have come through this service when the band was rehearsing, and they might have listened to them doing a song like Comfortably Numb, right? And going like, what the heck does that have to do with worship? You know, and shaking their head. And that was one person in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who came through here who just didn't get it. And yet that narrative is still circulating around. That narrative is still part of our history. But then so are these other more profound narratives of people who are saying to me and to others in here, I pretty much had been rejected. I pretty much felt ostracized by the church, or the church no longer made sense, or I experienced this kind of thing at church, and then I found 11:11. And a woman last week who came up to me and shared with me that her son had died not too long back, and the song we did, Graceland, at the beginning of the service, she came up and she said afterwards, she says, I've been thinking about how to put my faith back together out after this tragedy. That was the song that was played at his funeral. It was one of his favorite songs. You sang it this morning, your message about openness and about mystery and about just going with the ground of our being and staying connected to that. She said it was so healing. And I'm paraphrasing what she shared, but it was so moving. And the reality is that those are the narratives that we hear all the time. This is a distinctive kind of community. Like any other community of faith, we have our narratives. But they don't tie us down, But there might be people who will say, I know who you are because you've been a part of that group, but that's such a limited understanding of who we really are. The people didn't really know who Jesus was, what Jesus had become, right? They just nailed him down to that narrative, and he could do nothing there. The message for us may be if we get too stuck to the narratives, we can't do anything, right? We can't really do anything new. And yet we have this great opportunity to move beyond into something else and to continue to grow and to be a part of the mystery of God's presence in our lives. So what do we take? Well, he says take a walking stick, but you basically got all that you need with you already. He sends them out and says, go into the world and share this news of openness and of God's love and God's inclusive outreach and the grasp of the gospel. And of course, it's got something else in this message. If you read what the Great Commission has said in other places, it's preach freedom to the captives, set the prisoners free, sight to those who can't see, food and clothing to the hungry and the poor. I mean, basically, it says shake up your presence. Shake up your comfort zone, which is a really difficult message to preach sometimes. They just got through watching how Jesus got a little bit ostracized and ignored, and now we're being sent out to kind of do the same thing. How do we encourage people to see differently? How do you change people's minds? How do you change our minds when it's comforting? I heard this TED Talk the other day. It was on change, and it came out, I think, last week. It was the TED Radio Hour, so that's really great because they collate a whole bunch of different talks around one subject. And as he was asking this one author, comedian, and blogger whose name was Lovey Ajaya, and he was asking her about her outspokenness and how she goes from one place to the next, speaking on issues of racism and privilege and of justice and change and really uncomfortable topics. And he asks her, he says, how do you get people to change who don't want to? Why would anyone want to change from a place of privilege or comfort for just that? Why would anyone want to change for comfort? Why would anyone want to leave this place if it feels so comfortable to go someplace that we don't? How many of you have been over to the ballroom yet? So just a few of you. You don't even know where you're going. Why would you do that? I'm amazed. I'm truly amazed by the witness of this group willing to do that, to move there. Most folks would just say, what do I want to leave here for? This is such a comfortable place. This is a place where so many of my memories have been. This is a place where I experienced where as Sharmid said, where one of my loved ones had, I think it was you that said that, or maybe somebody. No, it was the DeAndre who said that. Where one of our loved ones had passed on, and this was their favorite place. And so we have these memories that seem tied to this space. Why would I want to leave here? And you know what she said, which I disagree with her entirely. She said the reason why is because when you stay in one place, your story is so boring. It doesn't grow. You don't change any. You don't grow any. And I'm thinking, I don't want to grow. I don't want to change. Why do I want to give up anything? I'll give $10 to this missional thing that they were talking about. But why would I want to give money to that? You know, I'm comfortable. We get comfortable, and we even sort of have these unconscious sort of narratives that secure us in our comfort zones. Why would we want to change? But she said, because if you don't do that, your life becomes so boring. You miss out on so much opportunity. But I say there's something else here. This is where we oftentimes get tied up in what hope really is about. You know, we sometimes think hope is about my needs or my healing or my crisis or my friend's crisis, which is really my crisis, right, because I hate to see them in pain, or my relative's crisis. We think hope is about fixing that. And so often, of course, that we fall back on that sort of bellhop kind of orientation of what God is, that Santa Claus kind of orientation, when reality suggests to us that God is so much bigger, and that the story is so much bigger, and that our little narratives are part of a much larger narrative of hope in the world. And that is where we begin to find it, is by participating in that. So that injustice, the reason why injustice is such an issue is because if it's not fixed, then our narrative as a culture dies, or our narrative as a humanity dies, or our narrative of compassion as a community dies. We have to participate in that narrative that's larger than us. Well, that's the invitation. That's what Jesus invites them to go out. That's what we're invited to do as we move from this place and we move into that next space at 512, the historic 512. I tell you, I woke up this morning again. I keep waking up with the same dream. I'm going to share it with you because I'm vulnerable, and I'm inviting the band to come on up here and get ready to do this. But I'm going to share this with you. I have this dream where I'm standing on one side of the shore, and I'm looking across the bay, and it's a place where we visited, some of us, when we were in Ireland. It was that place, the causeway, the Giant's Causeway. Some of y'all remember that. And remember the bay that went around and the giant cliff that came out there, and there was a trail that went up the side of that cliff. And it was not a wide trail, but in my dream, I keep seeing from across the bay this car that has like a station wagon, and it's carrying people in it, and it's going up this side of the cliff, this side of this trail. And as it gets up higher and higher, the trail's getting steeper and steeper, right? And then as it gets up towards the top, it's almost vertical at this point. And I'm thinking, I don't know if it's going to make it. And at the last minute, I close my eyes. I have this anxiety. But I think I'm wrong for this anxiety. I truly do. But my unconscious mind wants to disagree with me. My unconscious mind lives with this anxiety that I don't know what the future holds. I really don't know. But I believe in you people. I really do. I believe in the message that you people have as a community and what you say as a community and what you bring to this church as a community and what you bring to the community as a community of faith. That openness, that inclusiveness, that willingness to doubt and to question and to pursue something greater than our own comfort zones. I really believe in that. So I think I'm going to open my eyes. I really do. I think I'm going to open my eyes the next time I dream. I'm just going to go, come on. They made it.